And the point of the whole short form series and an experiment basically was that we had, if I remember correctly, 6 very different kind of content creators who all do some kind of content on social media platforms that usually get censorized. So it could be sexual content, it could be conspiracy theories, it could be body positivity, or then it could be like extreme sport.
If the trust is cracked, where do we stand? Who keeps score when the facts land? This is media in the margins. Media in the margins.
Welcome, everyone. Thanks for being here. Before we begin, a quick note on how this conversation's going to work and my transparency statement. This podcast approaches journalism as a public, evolving process rather than a finished product. So we treat knowledge making as something that's developed through a dialogue, not delivered as final authority. While we retain editorial control, our goal is to make parts of that process visible, its uncertainties, its limits, its revisions over time. Corrections and updates will be documented in the show notes. And for context, I'm currently affiliated with Oslo Met University in the Department of Photojournalism. This conversation is being recorded on March 31st, 2026. And with that, let's begin. We're going to be focusing today on how journalism is changing on social media and what it takes to reach audiences that aren't engaging with traditional news outlets. We'll look at how trust, authority, and storytelling are shifting in that space. And joining us today, our special guest is Salla-Rosa Gröhn. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yeah. It's Gröhn.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Gröhn, for clarity.
It's new to me even because I quite recently changed my last name.
Notice that also. And your name, if people happen to see it, remind me, what was your last name only not so long ago?
Leinonen.
So some of your bylines and credits will be under that name if people are looking you up.
Yeah.
Salla-Rosa is a Finnish media professional specializing in social media journalism and audience engagement with extensive experience working on youth-focused platform-native storytelling at Finland's public broadcaster, ILE or Yle.
Yeah.
Okay. She is also a former fellow or current fellow of economics, Polis.
Former fellow of the LSE, London School of Economics, and a current fellow of the Reuters Institute.
Thank you. And you recently, 2022, published a report called Can Journalists Be Influencers? Examining how journalists adapt to platform-driven environments and engage hard-to-reach audiences. Is there anything else you'd like to add? Did I get that right?
I think that was all. Yeah.
Okay, all for now. Always evolving. Okay, great. Let's jump into some quick questions, or I think will be quick questions. We'll see. Can you give me what you would give one word to describe journalism right now?
Evolving.
I like that. Just for reference, where do you get your news information today?
Well, of course, through social media, because it's part of my work to see how different kinds of information is distributed on social media platforms. But I use applications, all kinds of news applications from Finnish media, but also from international media.
And how do you distinguish when you're looking online at social media content? Do you have any go-to places or people outside of perhaps what I'll call old school or legacy media?
Well, I do follow most kind of news creators out there. Of course, language is sometimes a question that can I understand, because of course I try to go through news influencer content or news creator content from all around the world to see what kind of things are produced. But yeah, I do I do follow quite avidly different news content creators.
And you're working across internationally across, I imagine, different languages, but do you find English is predominant for reporting, or how does language fit into that?
Now I should have the top list of what are the most spoken languages in the world. But I guess, of course, English is dominating the Western media. But then again, we do have, I don't know, like a huge Arab speaking media. We have huge Spanish speaking media, Chinese, like so of course English is dominating the Western world, but I guess it's not so dominating elsewhere.
Well, if I want to, as an English speaker, get local news from around the world, how can I get that information?
Just as a, I don't know what, maybe, do I understand the question correctly? So just kind of how to get the information.
Well, I'm curious, like on social media feeds, it's tailored to me mostly. And if I'm looking at English content or English speaking content, but I want to, let's say, get content from Brazil, from an independent creator, is there currently an easy way to do that?
I guess yes and no, depending on your language skills. But of course, I guess the AI, all kinds of AI applications would be helping in translation. So in many platforms, they have integrated the kind of simultaneous translation for the videos. I don't know how trustworthy those are, at least yet. When they don't recognize the languages so well, we know that, for example, in Finnish language, that especially like a couple of years ago, the translations weren't so accurate and trustworthy, but I guess that's going to change within time. So I think that's going to help us. And of course, you can quite easily, for example, like try to translate something. So yeah, but I don't have an easy answer for you for that.
I guess that would be a challenge right now, or a barrier for entry to the widest variety of news available to us as consumers or audience members. I'm just thought processing.
Yeah, and maybe to add, of course, like that if we actually want to, we can hire people from these areas as well to do fair coverage, which will be accurate and with people who actually speak those languages and can understand those like clear nuances in everything. So yeah.
As we kind of shift towards questions about your work specifically, can you define for me what you would consider independent creator journalism, or if that's even the label that you would give that kind of group of people doing content?
Well, at least the most typical ones that we see now, especially in Western countries, would be someone who's been working in mainstream media at some point, has a background in journalism, usually a journalistic training, not maybe for sure, but usually has at least a lot of work experience, and then has decided to go on their own. I think has decided to go on their own and created some kind of a monetizing. No, I'm doing it again because now I'm lost in words. Created a way to get revenue from the journalism they do, and we can see, of course, a lot of people who have decided to do commercial collaborations, but then we can, of course, see the ones who have done it like subscription based. So there's a lot of different ways of being able to do that. But I think that's kind of the basic setting. But then again, we have so many people who work for traditional media as well, or legacy media as well as a freelancer, but then they do have their own channels, which they give them revenue as well, and they do original reporting there.
And for this group, subset of journalists, do you think that area is thriving, surviving, or dying? And why?
I think this is not one of your options though, but I think it's growing and it's becoming more established, and definitely there's more money there. But of course, it's depending on what kind of ethical and journalistic guidelines you want to follow yourself. That kind of is connected to where do you get your money. And maybe to add from your previous question, of course, we do have players on social media who are considered to be news creators who don't have any journalistic training as well. So of course that's really bending the boundaries of journalist roles here.
Yeah, that's one of the topics I did want to touch on is as far as what are the challenges to being an independent content creator journalist if we consider ethical boundaries or framework for journalism, and how is that enforced or should it be enforced?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of responsibility for the individuals on how they want to work, basically, because there are no general guidelines like now you have to work like this. Of course, there are a lot of different guidelines for commercial collaborations and these kind of advertisement rules on social media. It's like in different countries they are different. How you should always transparently say who is the one who's sponsoring the video, for example, or who you are collaborating with and what kind of a collaboration it is. But we do know that everyone doesn't follow these guidelines either. And also depending on the country, these can be very different what is allowed on social media. So yeah, it's, I wouldn't say a wild west, but kind of like I don't know. Yeah, it's very kind of versatile how people approach those kind of rules and what is restricting you and what is not. I haven't heard that in many countries they would have endorsed these kind of journalism ethical guidelines towards influencers, but I know that this has been a discussion in many countries, also in the Nordics. Should we include these independent news creators to journalism ethical guidelines as well?
Hold them to the same standard.
Yeah, yes. And of course, like, I'm not sure, maybe in some countries they might have even tried something like that. I do not have this information. If someone has accomplished to do that, I would be happy to know know if there's something. But then I think the legislation right now is concerning more like children and online usage, and we know about these like social media bans in different countries. So I think they're more focused on that. And then maybe, yeah, let's see. Of course, this is not official legislation to have these Ofcom type of players. It's more like the, what is the right word for that kind of self
Yeah, it's like self-censorship or regulation or
self-regulation. Yeah, so that journalists are self-regulating themselves here. And it's of course not a law, but it is a part of the trustworthiness that journalistic media holds, that they do self-regulate.
your report on can journalists be influencers. I'll be linking to it in the show notes so they can read it as well. You argue that journalism is undergoing a structural shift from institution-centered authority to individualized platform-native communication, where credibility is increasingly built through personality, relatability, and engagement rather than traditional norms of objectivity and distance. I'm curious if this is what you see as a permanent evolution of journalism or as a transformation or a temporary state, how you see this.
Well, I think journalism always is like, usually when I do trainings or some kind of lectures of that paper and based on that paper's findings or the research, I always say first that all journalism doesn't have to be like this. But of course, that was done in 2021 and 2, and now we are in 2026. And I think at that point when I was doing that, everyone was like, oh, you're a bit like crazy when you're doing this kind of a topic. Like, it's not going to be anything like people were really suspicious about that. And of course, now we can see that yes, we just kind of were in different different times in the trend, because we have been doing that kind of journalism in my youth media company where I work at Yle Kioski for a long time. So we were kind of really in the forefront of everything. But through that, and from, I don't know, 2022, we have seen a huge shift towards audiovisual media. And I think that is something that is going to stay, so that the written text is coming less kind of focused in media because of AI, basically. I think that is one big reason. Of course, it's not going to vanish. I think nothing is, the written text is, of course, never going, I hope, never going to vanish, but I think more creativeness, and especially the usage of audiovisual elements and visual elements in general, is something that you must do somehow nowadays. And institutions versus individuals, of course, we have seen this trend for a long time, but I guess legacy media has always been connected to big personalities, but now it's just shifted to a different platforms, and it's making it a bit different how you should kind of build your personality on these platforms, and how much it actually needs to do it, like how much is like needed from you to be able to be authentic and trustworthy on those platforms. And that is a huge change. You cannot draw so like clear line between when you are a TV personality versus what you are on social media, and what you are kind of, how much time and effort you need to kind of do there. But then again, I don't think it's a new phenomenon. We have to remember that like in legacy media also, audiences have always been connected to interesting people, news anchors, like they're through the parasocial relationship, like watching TV, when they feel that these news anchors are their best friends. So I think this similar effect is just kind of moved to social media, and I think it's gonna stay.
And how do you see someone being able to build this authentic, trustworthy self in the age of AI? And who do we trust? What do we trust? And a lot of people pushing back against legacy media outlets.
Well, I think media and journalistic media in general has a lot to win here, because they do, like, usually a journalistic media is based on values that is really important nowadays, to bring trustworthy information, to be trustworthy, to be balanced, to be kind of really serving your audiences. So I think many times legacy media doesn't understand that they do already have those elements which are appreciated, but then kind of how to distribute it or how to be present on those platforms, it's just needs some kind of a switch to kind of be able to do that. But I think we can really use the kind of traditional values and goals in journalism as our benefits, and we should be proud of that. But we should be also able to really more clearly say and make people understand how do we work, why do we work like this, and what does it actually bring. Because when people start to not understand what is basically journalism and in what values do we work on those platforms where most of the people are present many hours per day, I think then we are starting to lose the game.
Have you noticed around the world a difference? Have you noticed there be regional differences?
Well, actually, the Reuters Institute published a news creator report last fall, I think 2025, maybe in November, that has had good data of the countries where news creators have like the biggest influence in the whole media spectrum. And US was really high in that ranking. But then the Nordic countries, I think Norway was one country that was included. Finland wasn't included in that specific study, but their traditional media or legacy media still had more influence. But it's a really interesting study to look at and kind of see the differences where do we have those. But I guess it's really kind of a question of the market, the language, how big is the language, how much basically advertisement money are you able to get in that certain market with the language you speak, but also like how strong is the legacy media. Do we have public broadcasters in those countries and how well they are funded? So it's really a bigger question of what is the market and how much space you're willing to or able to get in those markets. And then I can clearly also see the difference that in smaller markets, especially if you're working in a smaller language, then you might be it's more possible that you would be working as a freelancer for other media platforms, like legacy media platforms and companies, and doing it maybe as a side job, this news creating or creator work.
How do you think about, and maybe it's slightly changed to now in your research, but based on your report and current reflections, I will say, how do you focus on or talk about who is the hard to reach audience and which platforms are the best way to do native based storytelling for the media?
Well, I would say the hard to reach audiences are all audiences that are traditionally neglected by legacy media organizations. It's a question of diversity or the lack of diversity in media companies, in newsrooms. It's also the age of people who work there and who are traditionally the most loudest in the society, and usually they would be the older generation. So I guess it's a combination of things, but I think in every society these people are different, and it's only not about young audiences. It's like otherwise unserved audiences, for example, different kind of life back, like if the journalist media is formed only by very highly educated middle class people, how to be relevant for someone who is not, for example. So I think it's really something that legacy media organizations should really look in the mirror and think what you can do about this, because it's also a created problem.
True. That's what I was curious if you've identified anything that kind of fails or isn't successful as you've been doing research on this hard to reach audience building, and or successful on the other side.
Yeah, most of the most successful things usually that actually in the end might reach a broader audience as well. It's usually something that is done to a very certain, maybe even a niche audience, targeting something, and something really like a small group of people. But then we have clearly seen this, that when you can be like very relatable, relevant, and kind of on point to a certain group of people, then it kind of endorses as well the situation that other larger groups of people would be interested, because it's it has accomplished something which is very, especially in legacy media, sometimes really hard to do. So we usually try to focus on talent and to really define who do we want to reach and what kind of impact do we want from that. And I think those are the keys. And then it sometimes can need something, a bit out of the box thinking as well. Like, how do we get the talent that we do want, and how do we enforce the production with enough journalistic skills, for example, because we have done some productions that the personality who is in the focus would not be, for example, a journalist. So then we would back that person up with a journalistic team.
I see. Can you give an example of maybe something that people learned from that wasn't so successful, and an example that really worked well? Something concrete.
Okay, now I have to think about examples, but maybe the first thing to say would be that we work in a way that we try and fail and try again. So it's kind of allowed for us to do trials and not kind of like if we do something, we don't have to do it forever. We can do like shorter periods of trials of something and then kind of evolve and change and think again, because we know that those platforms that we work on, mainly at this point, it's YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram, not so much in the focus anymore, but used to be. Those platforms and the mystical algorithms, they change all the time. So yeah, you really, really need to evolve. I think maybe one interesting example was that, like, maybe kind of describing the way we work and do these maybe a bit unconventional things as well. So we did a production, I think this was 1 year ago that it was published. So it's called Sensorized. Yeah.
Hey, this is a non-commercial commercial, and the only break I'm taking in this entire podcast to make one request. If you're enjoying this content, guess what? We're not getting paid for this at all. So it would really help us if you would share, subscribe, follow, like all of those fun things that take a couple seconds, a minute of your time, means so much to us and technically doesn't cost a thing. So with that, back to the show. Thanks for listening. Oh, I almost forgot. I also would love you to comment. Let us know what we're getting right. Let us know what we're getting wrong and what you'd like to see more of.
And the point of the whole short form series and an experiment basically was that we had, if I remember correctly, 6 very different kind of content creators who all do some kind of content on social media platforms that usually get censorized. So it could be sexual content, it could be conspiracy theories, it could be body positivity, or then it could be like extreme sports. What else would it have? Yeah, then like in Finland there is a genre of social media creation, which is this, I don't know even how to describe it, but basically a genre of creators who get wasted on live, I don't know,
Like
not on YouTube.
streaming, getting
Yeah,
drunk.
live streaming. Yeah. So that people give them money to get wasted. Of course, there's a lot of ethical questions here, as we know, and these are not broadcasted or streamed on YouTube, because it would be censorized. But there are a lot of platforms that do allow that. And you have to know how to kind of work around the algorithms to be able to publish something on different platforms. So basically we have these creators and we learned from them that how are they, in their opinion, getting censorized on social media platforms. Yeah, then there was also a political activist as well who gets censorized because of the opinions and imagery what they post. And then we created this 4-episode mini series. All of the episodes were 10 minutes. And part of the whole production was the idea that we tested on different social media platforms where our series is gonna be censored.
That's fun. So what did you find out in the end?
Well, YouTube was fine, nothing happened. Instagram also almost fine. And TikTok was the strictest one. So on TikTok, I think we could publish, well, from four episodes, we could publish without any age restriction. Maybe one, I'm not sure. At least one got totally blocked. And 2 of them got like 18 age restriction. This is what I remember from the experiment. And then I think that was an experiment also to show that why do we need our own platforms? Because we didn't have anything in those episodes that would be against journalistic guidelines or anything which we could not publish on our own platforms. So then actually it created, we were of course hoping for, so that when people knew that we have this and we have such incredibly interesting personalities as well in the series. So that was a way for us to get people to come to our own platforms to watch it.
That's Well, that's really fun. And I'd like to watch it myself. If I want to watch it, where can I find it? What's the easiest way? Is there a link or a title I can look up?
I can send you a link. The problem is, of course, language, because it's going to be in Finnish. I can
figure something out about that.
Yeah. I can send you a private link where it's translated, but this is not published.
Okay. But if I want to give a link in your show notes, you'll send me a link that I can put down there if people want to watch it.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, I can send you a link.
Or
Yeah.
YouTube or wherever it was least censored.
Yeah, but then I'm going to send the link to our platform, because there it's quite fully. Yeah.
And it's not behind a paywall. Okay, great. That's the other thing that sometimes is an issue for obviously for the most number of people to see content.
Yeah, our VOD service, especially on browser, you can watch it, but of course some of these things might be geo-blocked, depending on if you're within EU or not. But yeah, but this series should not be blocked even in that way. So we try to keep it open so that it will be censored. Is it censored, censorized? Can you use both? I'm like, is it a word, censorized or censored?
Censored, but I like censorized. I personally like that as a title. So whether or not it's an actual word, I'm gonna have to fact check myself on that.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a good title.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
maybe the actual translation is censored, but I somehow say censorized because in Finnish it's sensuroidut. So yeah.
Makes sense to me too. So we'll go with that.
Yeah.
It works. Okay. Thank you. I like that example. Do you see authenticity and objectivity as competing frameworks, or how are they working differently in the social media ecosystem?
Great question. I don't think these are competing. They can be, of course, but when you think of journalism, I think you can be and kind of pursue authenticity in so many ways. And I think I guess the ways also are really in line with how does journalism work, basically. So I think like the kind of like being honest to how we work, and is it something that we can actually kind of show and be transparent, and can we emphasize it in a way that could be like not kind of like rubbing it in people's face, but how can we kind of normalize showing and talking about how journalism works, basically. So how whatever we create, how is it created, basically? And I think that's not anything that would be against journalistic values. Oh, there's a cat.
Yeah, sorry, my cat Max has entered the picture. Sorry to interrupt you. I was trying to I knew that would be a distraction. Sorry. You were saying how journalists can authentically present themselves and perhaps information so that they reach an audience, I guess, in a different way. Or is that what you're saying?
Yeah, also like I think it's a lot to do with like how do we talk about what we do, basically. Like, and how can we make sure that people understand what we do? But I think also when we know through research that people connect to online personalities in ways where when they talk about their lives, when they share some information about themselves, and maybe I think one thing is really important to understand is that people are interested in people who are not too perfect. I think journalists sometimes try to give the illusion that we are so perfect because like people are afraid of that, okay, maybe we are criticized if I show something which would be actually making me a human. So I think that's one thing to think about. How could you kind of be more perceived as a human, I don't know, like to be more relatable than to be like distant and kind of like authority, which is unrelatable. And I think there's a lot of things that you can do and share about yourself which would not be against objectivity or would not make you like partial straight away. So I think that's just a question of decision, what kind of things you are able to you want to share from your life if you're um, doing especially journalism online, and what do you want to share and what you don't want to share about your life or yourself, connected to, okay, is it kind of in the sphere where I'm working, like the themes, is it gonna be a problem for me?
Is there anyone in a positive way that you can give a shout out to, that you can think of like, hey, I appreciate how this online independent content creator is doing this right now, that you can think of? Is there someone you can give credit?
Well, there's so many. Of course, I would want to shout out, of course, my team members in Finland. Like there are incredible journalists who do it amazingly day to day, and I'm really, 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 really proud of all of them. Um,
Go ahead. Do any of them have their own independent also? So they have like a presence with your company and then a presence independently?
Yeah, many of them, and we do work with a lot of freelancers or independent creators in projects, definitely. Maybe, but mostly we try to, especially like when we create something for something long term, we of course try to keep these people in-house. And it's great that so many of them have been wanting to stay with us. So it's really, really great. But I know that sometimes as well, like some other opportunities can be tempting. So then we, of course, work around to see how can we kind of continue doing things as well together. Sometimes it is possible, sometimes it's not.
So like more, sometimes it ends up being more of a partnership where the person can work with the legacy media and stay some independent, and that's okay.
Yeah. Just to be
Can you
clear,
give an
I'm not kind
example?
of able to talk about any specifics here, so that's why I'm not mentioning, because for at least in Finland, it's maybe this is not something you should include here, but just to say as a background for you, but it's illegal to talk about the employment relationship for me as
It
the
is.
representative of the company. I cannot disclose this information. So that is why I'm answering weirdly here. So maybe, yeah.
Important to, I don't mind if you don't mind me including that as a caveat. That's why we aren't including that information. But you can give a shout out to some of your colleagues who are doing work online and through legacy media.
Yeah, so all of them are still, I think, yeah, all of them are still in our company. And of course, Jaakko Keso, who is maybe one of the most known name in our journalistic oh my god, I'm gonna start again.
Yeah, start again. Take two.
Yeah. Yeah, so I really do want to shout out to everyone at Yle Kioski. They do incredible work, and they've been able to kind of like, they are always able to create something new and surprising. So I really want to give a huge shout out to everyone there. And of course, especially to my previous team members there. I miss them as well now when I've been away for a while. But and they should be proud of themselves. They really maybe don't understand how groundbreaking things they do.
Yeah, and if people are interested, I'll link to some of their content in the show notes so people can take a look at their work and what's happening. I'm
Yeah.
curious, in all of your research for your report, and maybe, since then, do you have a story or example that you want to share? So, do you have maybe a story of how you went about getting your research done for your report? Can journalists be influencers? Or maybe an example that exemplifies your kind of findings?
Well, I think the world has proven that it's a thing, even though I was really worried at that point when I was doing it. I was like, okay, it's not going to make any sense and no one will care. Actually, it's nice to be shown that it was an actual thing. I was just so early on when I was doing it. And of course, the terminology has changed also from that point quite a lot. So usually now you talk about creators then rather than influencers in this news context, but it doesn't really matter. But I think especially if you are working in legacy media, I think the question would be that how would our societies look like and how will our societies look like if journalistic media is not present at all on social media platforms? And I think this is a question that should be taken really seriously. We really do understand all kinds of trouble connected to big tech platforms and regulation and not regulation on those platforms, and all kinds of content bans on those platforms, and like ethical questions as well. But then at the same time, we do know that most people spend hours and hours there daily. And I think there is such a huge need for credible, trustworthy information on those platforms. And maybe my what I want to say is that please use that opportunity to be able to create something new, to connect with people that might not be interested in what you do and then take it seriously, that it's not a thing that it's going to go away, and really think of the kind of consequences if all trustworthy players will be absent. What will happen?
And then how do we, I guess, work as a society to make sure that the ethical, trustworthy, authentic sources are supported and lifted up? Is that fair?
Yeah, definitely. And then what are the funding models? How is it self-regulated? Is it possible to be able to sustain some kind of a business doing that or not? And will it need, I don't know, like unethical choices so that you won't be able to sustain yourself if you just kind of need to take whatever commercial collaborations that you can just kind of make a living? So I think it's really about also like funding models, but there should be more discussion about how could it be a win-win situation, because legacy media companies do need those audiences, and then we have a bunch of people who might be journalists or might not be journalists or something in between those roles that do have these audiences. So something really to think about, and how can we work around these questions with respect to both sides as well?
I love those questions. Thank you. I think that is the direction the discussions and the planning needs to go, for sure. I'm curious, is there anything we didn't touch on that I should have asked you, or we should touch on before we depart?
I think we covered quite a lot of things. I think this was you had excellent questions and really on point. And it's been a pleasure, really.
Thank you. Pleasure on my side too. I do want to thank you so much for your time. And as my final kind of shout out to, or, call to action for you and for our audience, if there's something that we missed, we want to hear from you. And we will log updates, corrections in our show notes as things change. Consider subscribing, supporting our independent channel and documentation. And till we meet again, which I hope we do soon.